I wanted to do a little video about how I make and paint into my tiny sketchbooks that I made out of Saint-Armand paper made near my home in Montreal. I live in Burlington, Vermont. So I always travel when I have a sketchbook with a little clip, because when you open it, you want and work on it, you want to be able to keep it down, especially if it's windy. I decorated the front with the 4 colors that I used in this palette, which is Dandelion, Leaf, Clover, and Violet. Red clover is the official flower of the state of Vermont. So I made this palette thinking of the typical wildflowers that we see, and other than red clover, which is not out yet, the others are all pretty visible these days in late May, and they will remain so for a while. So I painted these using those 4 colors only, and I have a red clover, violet, a dandelion, and some leaves. Now, the inside of this sketchbook has not been painted yet. It's completely empty. And I was going to show you how I like to work with these. Since it's so small, I like to attach it to a thicker board, in this case 3, because they're kind of thin. And I'm going to use bigger clips than the cute one that comes with the sketchbook, just to have a little bit more holding power. And I'm going to put it on both sides, even though with these tiny sketchbooks I like to paint just on one side. So this is going to be the painting side. And before I even start painting, I like to sketch kind of an outline to give myself a little frame, and this way I don't end up going to the edges, because the space is never enough for me, no matter how big the sketchbook is. But the trick is to pick a subject that will fit. And in this case, I'm going to start with the one flower that's really on its last few minutes of life. And these are, I just picked them walking home this morning. They are some kind of crab apple flower. And I'm using a little pencil that I like to include in this kit, but any number 2 pencil will work. And I'm doing a very rough outline of the petals. The point here is to look, to see, to enjoy, not really to create any kind of masterpiece. And I didn't really arrange the flowers. I got rid of the ones that were really broken. Plus, I didn't want more than a couple. As it is, they barely fit here. And the leaf. I'm going to cheat a little bit with these projects, because I'm going to use both of the palettes that I recently created, and one is called the Vermont Wildflowers that I've shown you, and the other one I named, I'm going to skip one of the leaves, I named Vermont Landscape. So in this other one we have a light earth color, a foliage color, which is a darker red, very pale sky blue, and another green, which I called grass. It's a little bit darker than the previous green. So very light, quick sketch. And then I'm going to use this water brush that I put in some of the kits. It's a teeny tiny one, and I filled it with water. I love to travel with water brushes. I rarely use them at home, but they're very nice. And I'm going to use that light earth as a base for these, even though they're really more pink. But I'm going to mix it with, see, I'm squeezing, trying to get some water out of this. There we go. It's a new brand. I picked it because it was so small, and I thought it would fit better with the size of the rest of the little set. So after that light earth, I'm using some of the clover. See, it's nice to have a mixture of colors. It just gives nice variety. To your painting. And something that, if you've seen me paint before, you'll know it. I don't really care about realism. It's more about expressionism and expressing oneself and playing with color. So I'm going to go for that little foliage red to create the stems and a little bit of depth here. I've clearly changed the size of things to make them fit in the context of this tiny sketchbook. I'm using these portable tissues, and I'm going to use the darker green. So rather than the leaf, I'm using the grass. It's lovely. I hope there's enough light here. It's a little bit dark today. It was sunny earlier. I was happy to have gone for a walk then. But it's cloudy now. See here how I'm going outside of the frame? That's kind of fun too. I think people who do journaling more seriously than I do that, and it looks nice. I'm going to let this dry and then do a little bit of, right, first I'm going to lift. It got too dark here, so I'm lifting some of it just with a clean brush. All right. I had to take a break longer than I expected because my son came by, and in the meantime these flowers pretty much died, as you can see. So I will do a few things with them here without really having much to go on. But that's okay, because we talked about expressiveness. Something I do want to do is have the little, I don't know what they're called, those little threads here. And I will do that later when it's completely dry and maybe with a gel pen. So I'm just going over to intensify the colors. And then I'm going to call this done. I'm kind of pleased with how this came out, even though my models died before I could do anything. So I used a gel pen here that's gold, but it doesn't show up so well. And then a white one, just to suggest those little thingies, I don't know what they're called, inside the flower. And I'm going to call this done. And I'm going to turn the page and do my second flower that I picked this morning. And again, I'm going to start with just, look, I'm not even going straight here, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a... And my next model is going to be a dandelion, which I've seen beautiful representations of dandelions done with negative painting from the top, and that would require many layers. So I'm just gonna suggest where the shapes are with my pencil, and I'm gonna do it from the side. And it's important to me to get the leaf here, because the name dandelion comes from the French lion's tooth, Dandelion, and supposedly that's because of the shape of the leaves. So let's keep the leaves the way that they should be, like a lion's tooth. So very, very, very basic sketch. And I'm going to go in with my colors. I'm going to start with my dandelion, of course. A limit to this palette is that there's only one yellow. I like to work with at least 2 yellows, one pale, cool like this one, and one warm. But it's also fun to work with a limited palette and see what you can do with what you have. So I'm going to use a little bit of the earth, which is kind of a warm yellow, to give some dimension to this. Then I'm going to go in with my paler green, which is my leaf green, and do those bits of green that are under the flower. And I'm also going to do the basic shape of the leaf with leaf green. It's a lovely pale transparent green here. The name of the pigment, in fact, is pale French green. I don't know what's especially French other than the fact that these pigments come from France. So here we have the shape of the lion's tooth, and I'm going to let this dry and come back to it in a minute. Simple dandelion, but I think what is nice about watercolor, or something that I would consider kind of success on any particular sketch that I'm doing, is whether it's recognizable. I'm using that darker green that I called grass green here. And let the imagination of the viewer, or your memory if you're painting for yourself, do the work, right? So I love that about travel sketching. When I look back at my travel sketches, something I don't do as much now, but someday, do I recognize, and what are the memories associated with that place and time? So that's kind of what we want out of a little sketch. So I'm pretty pleased with this, and I'm gonna let it dry while I pick the next flower. And I think for variety it's going to be a leaf instead, and it's going to be, I'm getting it out of this, one of these, I think they're Japanese maple leaves. Let me just say that there aren't any in my garden, so while walking I picked these up. And I won't get into any more detail on that. So I'm just going to do one, and look at the beautiful, beautiful shape of these leaves. There's a lot of different maple trees in here in Vermont, and this is one of them. And so before I even let this dry. I think I can play with fire here, or with water rather, and just do the initial sketch. And so I do my square. And then this is kind of tricky because it's a complicated shape. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm gonna put it a little bit this way, and let's say if I use the whole length, I'm gonna have the central here, and then obviously I don't have room for the whole thing, but I'll do my best. And you know, when you sketch from nature, something like this, the actual specimen is not going to survive much. No one's going to ask you, "Ooh, can I see how much this looks like the original?" So it doesn't, you shouldn't stress out about being too accurate. I think I'm going to do a combination of this foliage color. It is leaves after all. But this is more like the color of... By the way, see how I'm holding this? I'm doing this so that the previous page doesn't touch because it's still wet. So my dandelion doesn't get imprinted on the page next to it. But the result of it is that I'm really not painting comfortably. My hands don't have a place to rest. But you know what? It's kind of fun to do it that way. Gets you off the hook to some extent. Your expectation of perfection can go out the window. And since perfection never really was part of the equation here, it's already out the window. The difference is that now you know. And I'm dying to see what happens if I add some of this violet. Now violet has a lot of blue, and this foliage has a lot of orange, and blue and orange are complementary colors. So as I expected, I get a lot of graying of the colors. They're no longer as bright as they were. But again, it's part of the fun. The original is not that bright. So I think if I were trying to do a flower, I might be disappointed. I like how this paper is a little bit rough. See how the edges are rough in some places? I don't like how precise this edge is here, but it might be too late to get a rough edge because it's dried. So I'm going to let this dry completely and then come back to it.